to another episode of the Ultimate Creative Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Milling, and today we are talking about everything you need to launch your podcast. So I'm going to be releasing my new program in a couple of weeks. It's all about podcasting, and it's literally all the tiny little things you're going to need to know. But today, I'm going to focus on just the essential pieces that you need in order to launch your own podcast, because I think a lot of people are looking for ways to have a creative outlet right now while we're all stuck at home, and also find different ways to market their businesses. So this is going to be really great for you if you're looking for a new way to add to your marketing mix that's really intimate, that really connects with your audience. So the first thing that you need to launch your podcast is an intro and an outro, and it can be pretty cut and dry. Okay, here's what I like in a really good intro. It's no more than 30 seconds, even that's a little long. It states what the show is, it states the host's name, and it says what the show is about. So a really straightforward example is, this is the Ultimate Creative Podcast with your host, Emily Milling. This is a show about designing your own creative career and the different ways you can earn money with your amazing creative skills. There you go. Very straightforward. You're going to want to underlay a little bit of music with that to make it pop just a little bit. And you can get royalty-free music at Envato Elements, which is a digital asset subscription that I use all the time. And then there's also Audio Jungle, which is like the next level up. So you can buy pieces of music for like, I don't know, $10. There's also this really cool guy, Christopher Postil in Nova Scotia, and he has a whole bunch of other audio and music that you can buy from him, and it's all at soundslikeanearful.com, I believe. He's got a really fun podcast. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but it was a treat to listen to while it was on. And I used to do some podcast editing work for him for this show called Sleep With Me. And it's bedtime stories for adults who need to go to sleep. I fell asleep a lot trying to edit that podcast, but I digress. We're going to talk about outros now. An outro is where you want to give your listeners a call to action. You want to tell them, sign up for my Patreon. You want to tell them, rate, review, and subscribe. You want to ask them to follow you on Instagram, whatever it is. Keep in mind, though, that many people are probably going to just skip through this end piece. So if you use the actual content of your podcast to do these promotions and these call to actions, it's probably going to be a lot easier. By the way, you can sign up for the waitlist for my podcasting course on my website at theultimatecreative.com. Oh, see how I just so naturally put it in there? It was very unnatural. You're also going to want to layer some music in under the outro as well. Give it energy, give it personality. This is your chance to tell everybody what you're about in a few very short seconds. Number 2, you're going to need podcast artwork. iTunes prefers it if your podcast artwork is 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels at a minimum. And this has become the standard for all podcast aggregates and hosts and apps, all of the different podcast places. It can certainly be larger than this, though. And I would recommend that you do make it a little bit larger because you want to have a high quality image going up there. The things that you should include in your podcast artwork would be a very simple, clean image, either a headshot of you or you and your co-host, and clean text, not anything flowery or totally illegible. Clean text that says the title of your show. And the reason is it's going to be this big when people are looking at it on their phones. It's going to be teensy-weensy tiny. And you want to make sure that as people are scrolling through, they can instantly recognize it. It should be recognizable, it should be clear, uncomplicated, and it should really speak to who you are. Number 3, you need a podcast host. Not you, silly. Although you're the greatest podcast host around, or so I've heard. A podcast host is the place where you put your audio files and it hosts them for you and sends out the signal to the apps like iTunes or Spotify to say, this is a new podcast episode coming out. It'll create a unique URL for you, which is an RSS feed. So you've probably seen the little orange thing, it looks like a Wi-Fi signal. That's an RSS feed icon. Your podcast host you'll upload your episode into the podcast host. The podcast host will say, okay, I've got a new track in here. I'm going to tell everybody else that there's a new episode, and automatically it's going to go into iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, blah, 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 without you having to do anything. You do have to submit your show to these podcast aggregates the first time around, only one time, and then it's done forever. And it can be a little bit of a pain in the ass, but you don't ever have to do it again after it's done. So, there is that element to it as well. You will take your RSS feed and you're going to make an account. You're going to painstakingly make an account for all of these different platforms, and then you're going to submit the RSS feed to the individual platform. For iTunes, it's going to take a couple of days. Just know that, okay? Like, a lot of these are automatic and instantaneous, and for whatever reason, iTunes seems to think that it is the biggest hotshot of all time, and it can be discerning in the shows that it accepts. Which brings me to my next point about submitting your show. iTunes no longer lets you do a trailer. So a lot of people in years gone by, would put a trailer in their feed, and it would be like a couple of short minutes, and it would say trailer or promo or whatever in the title, and it would be so that you could do a soft launch of your episode, which effectively means you can wait to officially announce episode 1 until all of these podcast aggregates have accepted your feed. And because iTunes takes a couple of days, it was a really great idea to have this trailer that you could use instead. But now they don't like it. They don't want you to use a trailer. They're like, oh, it looks like you have trailer or promotional something in your feed. Why don't you come back to us when you have an actual episode? And it's like, okay, but I wanted to have a clear marketing plan ready to go so that I can be a new and noteworthy right off the top. And by the way, the way to do that is serious, heavy marketing, H-core. Make all your friends go to iTunes and sign up and subscribe immediately as soon as the show hits the airwaves. That's how you get on new and noteworthy. And that's how you do it consistently. Anyway, I digress. Where was I? You're going to put episode 1 up in your feed, and then you're going to submit your show to all of these aggregates. A couple of days later, you're going to be in your regular cycle, and you won't have to worry about this ever again. So you can do your big major announcement. Plan to do that 5 days after you upload and submit your show to all of these different aggregates. It'll just make your life a little bit easier, and you will give yourself enough wiggle room if for whatever reason iTunes rejects your show, because sometimes it just does for stupid reasons. It'll give you enough wiggle room to accommodate that so that you're not saying, oh, go find it on iTunes, but it's not actually on iTunes. That does happen. Don't let it be to you. The last thing that you're gonna need is a marketing plan. A marketing plan is so important for everything that you're gonna launch. Even if the podcast is part of your marketing mix, people aren't going to know it's there if you're not promoting it and you're not telling them about it. So you'll want to have a whole bunch of social posts ready to go. Maybe you want to have a couple of blog posts ready to go, an email newsletter. You can also share it out just personally with your friends and family, because why wouldn't you do that? And then you want to have a consistent follow-up marketing plan for every episode that you release. So maybe you want to have an audiogram for your Instagram for every single episode. You have to make sure that you've got that prepped and ready to go. You're going to have, for sure, your show notes. That's another really important thing that wasn't major on my list, but you have to have show notes. You have to have relevant hashtags so that it's easily searched. And you want to make sure that you're driving traffic back to wherever it is you need people to go. And you have to make sure that all of your marketing has a very, very, very clear call to action. Subscribe to my podcast. Because that's how other people are going to find the show. If you subscribe to my show, for example, it's going to boost the show in the rankings on iTunes and wherever else. And it's, like any other algorithm, the more that people are interacting with your product, the more it's going to show up in other people's feeds. So, as with any marketing plan, you want to have a clearly defined SMART goal. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So within the first month of my podcast, I want to have at least 500 downloads on episode 1. There's a very straightforward, clear, definitive goal. And then you have to list all of your tactics. These are the things you're going to do to accomplish this goal. And if you are able to follow through, then most likely you'll have a successful launch. If you don't do these things, you will have a show for sure, but you may not necessarily have people listening to it. And that's a choice that you can make. Honestly, I launched my show to absolutely nobody because I was playing around and trying to figure myself out. And this could be, if you're nervous to put yourself out there the first time, maybe that's how you go about it. And then you go really, really hard in the follow-up episodes when you're way more comfortable. Everybody is a little bit different. As long as you have a specific plan, and my specific plan was to do a very soft, very quiet launch, you're going to be just fine. And so finally, I'm going to close by saying you can do this. So I'm just going to quickly recap everything that we've talked about. You're going to need an intro and an outro, podcast artwork, and that has to be 1400 pixels by 1400 pixels. You're going to need at least one episode in your feed. You're going to need a podcast host, which is something like SoundCloud or Libsyn, and you're going to need a marketing plan. Put all of these things together and you will have a successful launch for your wonderful, wonderful show. And I can't wait to hear it. As soon as you launch, tag me at _ultimate creative on Instagram because I would love to listen to it and I would love to share it out and be part of this amazing journey that you're about to embark on with your podcast. If you want to learn more about how to podcast, as I mentioned, I am doing a new program that's starting at the end of May, and it's going to teach you literally everything you need to know about podcasting. I'm so excited for it. Head over to my website, theultimatecreative.com, and sign up on the waitlist. It's all over the website. It's right on the homepage. You can also find information on this in the show notes for this episode. So if you like this, you want to hear more about podcasting, I want to know what you want to hear. I will do episodes based on what you want to hear. So leave a comment or send me an email at emily@theultimatecreative.com and tell me about it. I'm going to wrap up this episode now. Goodbye!